When my son Jay, male 18, was 6, his mother Jane, female 40, and I, male 39, got separated. It was a bad marriage from the get-go. We got married when we found out that Jane was pregnant with Jay and tried to become a family for our son. After he was born, things went well initially, and I worked hard to provide for the family without giving up on my dreams. I wanted to write professionally as a career, but I had enough sense to know that novels won't feed my wife and child. So I had two jobs as well, one at a pizza parlor and another at a car wash. I also ensured I could spend quality time with Jay because he was my world. Despite the circumstances of his birth, I wanted to be there for him every step of the way, unlike my own absent father. Although I was trying my best, Jane wasn't very supportive or invested. Hell, never mind me, she was barely there for her kid. I don't know how to put it, but it's like she only thought of Jay as an accessory without ever realizing how to take care of a child. I know it sounds like a mean thing to say, and I honestly would get someone not supporting their spouse if they had a pipe dream and were never working towards it. But I guess both of us were mutually incompatible. Her lack of involvement with Jay was also a big source of friction, as I never wanted him to feel unloved. Jane wasn't really working either. She did a few odd jobs, but her main responsibility in the family was to take care of Jay. Due to her constant lack of faith in me, our relationship deteriorated, and I eventually found out she had been cheating on me for well over 5 months. I was devastated. And although I had lost a lot of love for Jane by that point, cheating was a real low blow. When I told her I wanted a divorce, I got zero emotional response from her, as if she didn't care. However, I also wanted to ensure custody of Jay fell with me since I couldn't bear to lose him. Jane wanted to keep custody of Jay, though. I mean, less her and more her parents, as they didn't want to lose their only grandchild. While they knew that Jane had cheated on me, they chose to ignore it, hide the evidence surrounding it, and instead make up an entirely different story about me being unfit to raise a child due to my drunkenness. I mean, really? I had a beer on the weekends and that's it. They also testified that Jane felt unsafe in the marriage and I had denied her the opportunity to find a job to keep her under my control. As you can tell, none of this worked in my favor, and courts back then, even now to be honest, were biased towards the wife's side of the story. Not only did I lose custody of Jay, but my reputation was tarnished due to the rumor mongering Jane and her family engaged in. My social circle got a lot smaller, but the people who believed my side of the story were real friends. I mean, I genuinely thought it would be obvious from my behavior and the way I acted that Jane had made everything up, but I guess not. Jay, of course, didn't have a clue why his mother got full custody, and he didn't know what was going on at all. For the sake of his peace, I didn't exactly rant about his mother being a toxic person in front of him either. And all I told Jay was that his parents had fallen out of love. If he ever needed me, I'd be there for him. After that, I lost my favorite roomie and friend and could only visit Jay on the weekends. I pushed hard to have him come stay with me every now and then, but Jane kept putting roadblocks in the way. After that point, things went downhill for a while. Jane and her family slowly started poisoning Jay against me, while also not exactly treating him the best. They told him that I was abusive, and Jane constantly complained about me and the terrible things I had done. Credit where it's due. I do think his grandparents treated him with a lot of love and care, but Jane was a different story. She was quite negative about Jay's hobbies and interests and extremely controlling to boot. He didn't have a happy childhood. Since he thought I was even worse than his mom, Jay kept a distance from me, and although I could meet and talk with him, I guess he thought I had been a vicious person in the past. However, when Jay turned 14, Jane dumped him off at my house last minute for a week, saying she had to go somewhere. I don't think she'd asked Jay for his consent on the matter, and it was this or live alone while she went off. Her parents weren't available, so I finally got a chance to spend some time with my son. Things were really awkward at first, and I could tell that he didn't trust me. When I asked where Jane had gone, he gruffly replied that she had gone for a getaway with her new boyfriend, Brad. Apparently, this was quite common, and he felt like a burden in his own mom's life. I felt really bad about this, and we started talking more and more this week. One day, he casually mentioned to me while we were playing Mario Kart on my old GameCube, "Oh, Pete, you seem like a nice person. I don't get why you were so shitty with mom. It just doesn't add up." I stopped playing and looked straight at him and decided to tell him the whole story then and there. It finally felt like he might believe me now. With that, I told him everything, and he managed to piece together odd things about Jane's behavior that corroborated my story. I can't even begin to tell you how angry he looked at that moment. Something had changed then and there. Although he didn't bring it up again during the week, he apologized for the way he had been treating me and told me that he'll push to come to visit me more often. Apart from that, I'll always remember that week as the time I mentored my son about writing. I should mention that by now I had become a relatively successful writer, especially due to the ease of publishing on the internet, and it was a steady source of money for me. Jay was also a budding writer, and I recall discussing the principles of a good story with him. It was a good time. Since then, things have changed quite a lot. A few weeks after Jane came back, she called and started throwing around aspersions about me poisoning Jay against her. The irony! And I played dumb. He was acting cold to his mother after the information he had gotten from me, and she was retaliating by calling him ungrateful, spoiled, etc. This soured things between them even more, and their relationship was quite icy. I'll summarize the next 4 years in Jay's life with two big events. One being that he ran away from Jane's place and came over to stay at mine because apparently she had insulted his short stories that had been recently published. She forced him to come back by threatening to call the cops on me using the move that my history, ergo her lies, would play in her favor. Eventually, he had to go back against his will, and I couldn't do anything about it as much as it hurt. Second, he eventually found out that his grandparents were involved in the lies against me, leading to him saying a lot of hurtful things. I don't know the full story here, but basically, that led Jane to figure out that I must have told him something. She made my life hell. But now that the cat was out of the bag, there wasn't much she could do. A month before his 18th birthday, Jay called me and told me he was planning on moving out. He was going to get an apartment about an hour away from my place, and while I welcomed him to come to stay with me, I think he wanted to build an independent life. I agreed with his plans, and he also told me that he was going to expose Mom for what she is. That's when the real bombshell came out. He'd written a book about his experiences living with Jane throughout the last few years and even had a publisher interested. While it was fictional, Jay had written a scathing foreword that indicated Jane as the villain of the story. Some part of me wanted to ask him to modify the foreword because I felt like it may be more drama than necessary. But on the other hand, I felt like he had the creative liberty to do what he wanted. I read through his novel and it was good. I even offered some constructive criticism and he took it in good spirits. Jay left the house as soon as he turned 18. After this, I could tell that he was visibly happier, more focused on developing his career. A couple of months after the move out, the book was also published. I'm obviously not going to put it in here, but if you guys are interested, you can DM me for the link. This novel completely ruined Jane's life because it took off. A lot of teens could relate to the toxic parent storyline, and there were a lot of posts about it. Jay even got interviewed about it on a few news websites. I couldn't be prouder of my boy, but obviously, Jane had a different take on things. Her social media was filled with comments cussing her out for being a terrible parent to the point where she ended up deleting her socials. Her job was also in jeopardy after the story came out, and her parents apparently found out about Jane's abusive behavior towards her son through the novel. She'd hoodwinked them into thinking that she was doing the best job raising Jay, and I guess Jay never told his grandparents the real story. Maybe he lost trust in them after what I told him. Jane's been blowing up my phone and thinks that I manipulated my son into writing this story to ruin her life. I mean, that's clearly not what I did. But I did encourage his writing and also contribute to the novel after I knew of its existence. Would it just have been better to modify it to be a little less scathing? Update 1. My ex in laws reached out to me after the book gained a lot of traction. They apologized for lying about my character and told me that they regret what they'd done. They also asked if I could speak to Jay on their behalf and make amends as he wasn't taking to them after he moved out. I agonized over their call for a while, as I know they love Jay a lot, but it's tough to put aside their actions from the past. I feel like Jay also has a say in this matter, so I'll speak to him about what he wants to do too. Update 2. Jay and I went to go talk to his grandparents, and it went quite well. I think Jay should retain a bond with them, and he's cool with that if he knows I'm cool with it too. Jane had apparently had a huge fight with her parents about their decision, but they told me that they decided to go low contact with her due to how terribly she's behaving. Update 3. Jane is filing a defamation case against her son. This is actually hilarious to me as I type it out. I'm no Columbia trained lawyer, but I know that this case doesn't have a leg to stand on. LOL. NTA, and you went easy on Jane, in my opinion. I would have called her out way early. And I'm sorry you lost so much time with your son. Next story. I worked as a graphic designer in my aunt's small business. It was fairly basic stuff I did, but I took pride in my work and loved the freedom it gave me creatively. My aunt and I got on well prior to the business, but she became an issue to work under near immediately. It became cutthroat deadlines. No thanks and little pay, so I'll admit I got annoyed. I started putting less effort into the business as it just wasn't paying off. I had to look for a new job as the money just wouldn't cover me anymore. My aunt and family were disappointed in my lack of interest towards her business, but refused to listen to why I had to change. I still worked in the business with my free time, and I had accepted further pay reduction due to my now split priorities, but this apparently wasn't enough. My aunt came to me a few weeks after I had moved to part-time work and asked me to make up an ad for a full-time graphic designer. I was annoyed and hurt, but did it anyway. Since she wanted a full-time worker, I quit and submitted the ad to her as my final bit of work for the business. I went home and assumed that would be the end of it. A few days later, I get angry messages and calls from my family asking why I left the company when I knew my aunt was struggling. I was at a loss and called my aunt, who shouted down the phone at me. Eventually, my sister gave me the full story, which my family had been told. Basically, my aunt wanted me to move to full time and thought the ad would be a good indicator of that desire, and she was devastated that I quit. At this point, I was exhausted, and the few days I had away from everything really reminded me how good it felt to relax. So when my aunt called me and apologized, offering me my job back, I turned her down. She explained she needed my work back and didn't have enough money to hire anyone else. assuming I would go back on my reduced pay. I still refused, and we haven't spoken since. Her business failed about a month later, and everyone is blaming me. NTA, and you didn't ruin your aunt's business. No business has ever gone under because their graphic designer quit. You are one symptom of a failing business. And as the owner, your aunt bears that responsibility. Maybe she's bad at running a business. Maybe it was the market. Maybe it was sheer bad luck. But it sure as heck wasn't because their graphic designs fell behind. She's angry and bitter because she failed and is looking to pass blame to those around her. Hopefully, her denial phase is short and she can move on, along with the rest of the family. Next story. I've lived in my house for almost 3 years. I live on a corner house next to the road, a back road. A lot of the kids on the neighborhood play ball games in that area. This doesn't bother me much apart from when they kick it against my fence. One thing that does bug me is how often they would come to the door because the ball had gone over into the garden. I know this seems like such a small thing, but I am talking 5 to 6 times a day. I used to work from home, so I would just go get the ball and ask them to be more careful. However, I recently changed jobs and now work out of the house. My partner is still home through the day but is hard of hearing and never hears the kids when they knock. She actually is using more sign language than anything or reads lips as she really can't hear well at all without her hearing aid, which she only really wears when she's leaving the house. Anyway, since I haven't been home to answer the door, I found out the kids have actually been lifting my fence panel, coming into my garden to get their balls. I hate this. It makes me feel like my space and privacy is violated. I also have 4 dogs who are using outside when the weather is nice. I have cameras, so have caught them doing this and have evidence, but their parents don't seem to care. So I decided to screw all my fence panels in so they could no longer be lifted. Now, every night I go home, I'm greeted with a bunch of angry kids telling me their ball is in my garden and they can't get in. I just ignore them and throw the ball over without speaking to them. Yesterday, when I got home, one of the kids' mothers was at my front door. When I got out of my car, she instantly started yelling and calling me a thief for not getting her son's ball. I told her I was at work, and she started yelling about how my partner could have sorted it. I told her I'd go get the ball to calm her down, and she said I needed to fix my fence as it was broken and the kids couldn't get them on their own anymore. I told her it wasn't broken and I had done that so that they couldn't get in. This made her very angry and she started yelling. I told her I couldn't have them letting my dogs out and also mentioned how they almost broke my fence once, and she threatened to call the police for theft the next time I don't get the ball immediately. So AITA for stopping them from getting into my garden? And could they actually call the police when I'm not even home to get the ball? Update. After reading through some responses, I decided to take action. I looked through my camera footage and found all the time they have entered my garden or kicked the ball over in the last few months, and actually found on from January that they had actually come in and opened my rabbit cage up to find the rabbit. Luckily, my rabbit wasn't out there as it was winter. Following this, I went to the woman's house and met her husband. I explained what had happened, and although he wasn't yelling like his wife, he did not seem to care. So I explained I have evidence of his son trespassing on my property, damaging property, and evidence of potential theft, since he was opening my rabbit cage and pulling on my shed door. At first, he tried to laugh it off, but then I pulled up one of the videos on my phone and told him I was reporting this to the police. He stopped laughing and apologized and said he would speak to both his wife and son and to please not involve the police. I politely thanked him and left. On my way home, I ran into one of the other parents and filled her in on what was going on. She immediately apologized for her son's involvement. Her son had never entered my property, but has also lifted the fence and kicked the ball. She assured me he would be grounded and have the footballs taken away from him, and told him if they ever do it again, I should pop the balls. I did call the non-emergency number and got it all logged and the video sent, and the kind lady on the phone informed me if it ever happens again, I can call and press charges. I can actually press charges now, but she advised me to wait as they will only get a warning as this is the first time it's been logged. This also means if they do call to complain about theft, they will be informed of the logs against them rather than any action against me. I've also informed my insurance company, who assured me since it's logged with the police and I have screwed my fences, I'm in the clear. But they also recommend I get a no trespassing sign, so I will do that at the weekend. Thank you so much for all your help and advice. I will admit I had absolutely no idea what to do about it or if I even had a stand legally, so thank you all for the info you've provided. NTA. It's your fence to protect your bloody property. What does she think the police is going to do? Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.